I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now let's get this party started, folks. Season 3. That's right.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner, is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion?
You know who lives in a land of confusion.
Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Coming to you from a secret cave, hidden deep within the wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and we are broadcasting live from a secret cave hidden deep within the wilderness of Tennessee. That's right. We're ripping through the electromagnetic soup. We're tearing through the atmosphere. And we're tunneling away into your radio like a quantum particle. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Radio Show for Thursday, July the 21st, 2022. Haha. So whether you're on the edge of a reality, the edge of the galaxy, or the edge of your seat, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Folks, tonight we are going to continue the Freedom Flame series, and we're going to be doing this for quite a while. As we go forward, we're going to be discussing the 10 planks of communism and kind of a compare-contrast to the Bill of Rights. But we've got to start at the very beginning with an introduction to the Communist Manifesto, started in 1847 by the Communist League. We've got a lot of information to go through tonight, folks, and a little time to get there, and we will get there together. But first, let's go ahead and see who all we have out here in our chat room, both in the Dark Wolf's Den Show as well as the Ripon Rabbit Hole YouTube channels. How are we doing out here tonight, folks? So great to see every last one of you guys. Like Michael Fontaine, the only one that seems to be hanging out in the Dark Wolf's Den Show YouTube. Glad to have you there, Michael. At least somebody is holding it down. I'm right there with you, I promise. Over in the Ripon Rabbit Hole, we got Sandy checking in. Says, oh boy, this is an intro. I'm ready. Yes, Sandy, this is an intro to the Communist Manifesto. We've got a lot to cover this season. Games people play says hi ho tonight. I'm not sure what language he was speaking there, but he goes on to drop the link to the song Wonderland by Chick and Michael Musco, of course, our theme song, our opening intro music. Darius Munchhausen, glad to have you in the housen, my friend. Always good to see you. Maggie's Aces says, like a quantum particle. That's right. Lobo, Ohio, good to see you. Also, my friend, it is so good to be back with you guys. I cannot tell you enough how amazingly wonderful it is to be back on the air and back hanging out with you guys on a Thursday night. It is something that I have definitely missed. In season 3, this is, I hope, at least I like to think, going to be our biggest and best season yet. Most definitely will be our most important season yet. He says, Ni hao tong zai is hello, comrade, in Mandarin. So, hello, comrade. Also, Michael Fontaine in the Dark Wolf's Den Show chat did put, hello, my fellow comrade. Of course, comrade is what they all call each other, because in communism, they all see each other as equal. We've got a lot to cover. JoJo's waving in, just woke up just in time, JoJo's, to hang out with us. Listening to so much Freemasonry established to destroy God's Catholic Church and listening to Communist Manifesto, Satan, all Satan, says Maggie Zay. Says, I would not disagree with that. Then again, I am a capitalist at heart, so of course, I don't agree with a lot of the Communist Manifesto. Another reason to know the information coming up. Was tired from doctors today, says JoJo. Understandably so. We're glad that you're safe and sound at home this evening and able to join us right here on the Dark Wolf's Den radio show. It is a pleasure to have you. Also, Earth Daughter in the house. Always glad to see you. Once again, I've missed you guys so much, missed hanging out with you guys, being able to come in here and hang out and chat with you guys, but we've got a lot of information to cover tonight and this whole season. And whether you are hanging out in our YouTube chat rooms over there with us or listening around the world on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network at the RiponRabbitHole.com or on BitChute or Rumble on the replay, we appreciate having every last one of you guys along for the ride. That's right. And by the way, for tonight's episode especially and going forward through this season, you will want to make sure that you are logged on to the RiponRabbitHole.com. That's right, RiponRabbitHole.com. If you go over there, you're going to click on the first square on the top left-hand corner. It's going to have the Dark Wolf's Den Show logo there and thumbnail screen. And when you click that, it's going to take you to a page where a chat room is available. This chat room is going to be very, very important, as at a certain point in the feed tonight and every night going forward, we're going to be cutting the YouTube feed and will only be available through the radio, and to chat along, you will only be able to do it on the RiponRabbitHole.com. So make sure you are logged in over there, guys, as we will lose the YouTube feed at a certain point tonight. But before we do dive into this treasure trove of information we have to go through, folks, we've got two more fun little segments to do, the first of which we call Today in History. On this day in 1987, Guns N' Roses released their debut album, Appetite for Destruction. Upon release, it becomes the best-selling debut album of all time, selling more than 30 million copies upon its release. And that happened on this day in 1987, and that is today's segment of Today in History. Say what? Our quote of the day today, folks, comes from deep thinker Confucius. He says, and I quote, "Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance," end quote. Again, that is from Confucius, and that is today's segment of Say What? And I could not agree more, as being ignorant of something only allows that something to possibly harm you without you knowing it is able to, right? And that's a lot like the Communist Manifesto and communism in general. If you don't know the enemy you're fighting, you will not be able to conquer that enemy. You cannot fight what you cannot see, and that is why knowledge, being the power that it is so very important. And tonight we are going to introduce the Communist Manifesto, which has seemed to have a large impact on the world at large. But surprisingly enough, it's quite old. In 1847, a group of radical workers called the Communist League met in London. They commissioned Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who had recently become members, to write a manifesto on their behalf, soon known as the Communist Manifesto. Now, Marx was the original principal author. Engels was the money guy. He did the editing. He assisted in different ways, but mainly he financed the entire operation. And it's not to say that Marx actually believed what he wrote. He merely wrote what the Communist League told him to write down. Engels, as a matter of fact, was a business owner of a number of businesses himself, as we will find out that is actually very backwards compared to what the Marxist would like to do. You see, the Communist Manifesto is basically a critique on capitalism. Myself being an adamant capitalist, I think the most opportunity is available in capitalism. He points out a lot of the flaws of capitalism, starting out with the classes that he says are created under a capitalist society. Now, understand, he didn't look at religion, values, cultural ideas, anything of this nature when he wrote this. It was merely looking at an economic standpoint. According to him, capitalism is flawed in such that it would create two classes. The bourgeoisie, a class of people that is basically what we call the elites, the business owners, the ones who have more money or have the most of the money, the ones who run things, own businesses, things like that, factory owners, all of this. They own the means of production. Then you have the proletariat, the working class, everyone else. According to Marx, it would only become a lesser and more situation where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And I know a lot of times you hear that even today in America, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And it seems to me like the government system that seems to be in operation right now in the United States is definitely heading down this richer, poorer mindset, as they also believe in class struggle. We had very little to no issues in this country with racism or class identity or class struggles for the last 4 or 5 years, and then all of a sudden, upon change of leadership, we suddenly find class struggle being thrown back out there as a way to divide the proletariat by the bourgeoisie. He also believed that the bourgeoisie, the ones who held all the money, would, in order to make more profits, cut how much they paid the proletariat. Thus, the struggle between the leaders or the business owner and the worker. He claims this comes all the way from the feudal society, and that capitalism was born out of the idea of lords and kings and queens and those ruling over the serfs, so on and so forth. He also believes that capitalism is easy to take down and will destroy itself in a number of ways, as he believes the middle class workers would get tired of not making enough and having very little time on their hands, very little wages to do anything with, and very little ownership of anything because of how poor the conditions were. He believed that the middle class would rise up against the bourgeoisie, and instead of when a larger or a smaller group of people take over, they split the land between themselves. He believed the middle class would not be able to split the acquirements between itself and would fall into a utopian idea of what he calls communism. And communism, we grew up in, those of us who grew up in the 80s, I should say, 70s, 80s, maybe early 90s, but especially in the 80s, there was a big propaganda push against the big bad commies. Every movie was made against the commies. It was always fighting the bad red commies. The comic books was always against the bad commies. There was even a time in this country where General MacArthur, I believe he was a general, he was also a congressman, and he was pointing his finger at everybody in Congress and accusing them of being a communist. And as paranoid as the man was, he may have been on to more than one would think, as there's actually a way that it is suggested to take over America. I'm just going to step back a moment. We see that the bourgeoisie proletariat idea, though we do have different classes in this country, I would say his idea was flawed, that there would have to be a revolution and overthrow one class from another. I believe in this country we have worked it out to the degree of capitalism that the worker is protected. There's certain rights the worker has. The worker has to be paid a specific salary, though minimum wage we're finding is getting less and less nowadays with Biden inflation. But just the same, there's been ways that have been worked out economically in our capitalist society that has found workarounds to this, that has allowed the worker to have time off for vacation, allowed to have the amount of wages that are fair, and the ability to own things, if you will, though it is questionable how much ownership we really do have in the United States. As we go forward on this journey, we're going to find that you'd be surprised how much we are losing and how much we've lost so far. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but Marx believed in a series of planks, if you will, the 10 planks of communism. These are what we are going to be going over all season long. So listen up, folks. Here they are, the 10 planks of communism. Number 1, the abolition of private property in land and application of all rents of land to public purpose. In other words, this is where the state and the government own every bit of public land. There is no private property left. They own your house, they own the means of production, they own all property. Number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolition of all rights of inheritance. That's right, you don't get to inherit anything. Everything goes to the state. Again, we're going to go through each one of these, devoting an episode to each one. Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. So you'd better not disagree with the state. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. And I want you guys to think, as we go through this, how much alike today's society some of these may or may not sound, as the answers as we go forward through this series may surprise you quite a bit. Centralizations of the means of communication and transportation into the hands of the state. They want everything centralized. There can be no decentralization of any type whatsoever. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. So factories and any instrument of production is owned by the state. There is no factory owners anymore. You will own nothing and you will be happy. Number 8, that sounds like something else we've heard recently, right? Number 8, equal obligation of all to work and the establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. The obligation for everyone to work and an establishment of industrial armies. There's two words we don't hear together very often. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. Equitable. There's another word we keep hearing a lot in modern society. And number 10, free education for all children in government schools, and abolition of children's factory labor in its present form. Combination of education with industrial production. Now, there is no child labor in this country and under our capitalist ways, thank goodness, but each one of these are very, very important to implementing communism in any country. And each of these planks, like I mentioned a moment ago, we will be devoting entire shows to, are actually kind of working and worming and or have wormed their way into our modern society. Once again, why it's so very, very important to understand our enemy. And our enemy, of course, in this case being the communist, in my opinion. And to understand it, you must know what they believe. The manifesto discusses the relationship of communists to the proletariat, the general worker, you, me, and the average Joe. The immediate aim of the communist is the, quote, formation of the proletariat into a class, the overthrow of the bourgeoisie supremacy, and the conquest of political power by the proletariat. He believes by these means the proletariat will naturally attempt to set up what he sees as a utopian society under which the state owns everything and doles it out to the commoner as necessary. Now, this doesn't mean you won't own a toothbrush, for instance. They actually want the worker class to be very well taken care of as far as having the things needed to take care of one's self. However, they want to ensure that they also have complete power in the upper levels of the echelons of the government system. We remember in Russia or the USSR growing up, I remember there were a lot of these stories of people who dare not speak out against the government because they might be disappeared, right? They dare not speak against what they do because they may not live to see tomorrow, right? And when you're born under a communist society like this, your fate is already determined. If your father's a farmer, guess what? You're a farmer. If your father's a factory worker, guess what? You're a factory worker. Whether that be a steel mill or whatever the factory may be. You are literally property of the state, nothing more, nothing less. The state owns everything. You don't own your property as far as your house. You don't own your business. There is no business ownership under communism. There is only this utopian commune-like styled idealism. And let's not get this confused with communal living. That is something entirely and utterly different. What we are speaking on is more of the state-owned, state-doled-out type of living. In the manifesto, Marx also goes on to speak about abolishing the family unit. He says the modern family is based on capital and private gain. Thus, he writes, the communists, quote, plead guilty, end quote, to wanting to do away with the present familial relations, in that they want to stop the exploitation of children by their parents. Similarly, they do not want to altogether abolish the education of children, but simply to set it free from the control of the ruling class. It sounds good on paper, doesn't it, folks? Marx complains that the bourgeoisie claptrap about family and education is particularly disgusting, as industry increasingly destroys the family ties of the proletariat or the average Joe. Thus, it renders family and education as means for the transportation of children into articles of commerce. So he argues that children are only indoctrinated in such to be little workers of the capitalist system and aren't actually happy doing what they're doing and shouldn't be made to do such. Again, there can be arguments made that he may not be far off even talking about today's society, right? We will dig into more of this as the season continues. Communists are also criticized for the desire to abolish country and nationality. And they, of course, do want to abolish the idea of nationality. I am a nationalist myself, and I know a lot of people are scared of that word. Let me explain to you what the word nationalist actually means. One who supports and loves his country, his or her country. Let's be clear on that for those listening. But one that supports and loves his or her country. Well, I absolutely support and love my country. I don't know about you guys, but I consider myself very much a nationalist type guy. I have a swelling of pride for my country. However, communists argue that the working man has no country, and they cannot take from them what they do not have. National differences and antagonisms lose significance as industrialization increasingly standardizes life. This guy was very, very much against the industrialization of the modern capitalist society. Marx then says those charges against communism based on religion, philosophy, or ideology are, quote, not deserving of serious examination, end quote. So he did not like, I guess, his ideas challenged by those of religion or philosophy. Most communists to this day still don't like their pretty radical ideas challenged by truth of any type. And we see a very strange connection, I'd say, once again, to the modern times and the times of earlier, right? When things like the Communist Manifesto were actually written. And there was even a plan to take over America written quite a while ago. And there are 45 steps in this plan to take over America. And coming up in the second half, we are going to be discussing the 45-step plan that is still in action, to the best of my knowledge, as a way to turn the United States from a truly capitalist society into a communist, what I would call, wasteland. At least that is this host's opinion. Everybody has their own opinion of things. Of course, communism is just one of many economic and political philosophies, capitalism being another. And I can tell you that not a single time that it has been tried, neither socialism nor capitalism has ever succeeded. As a matter of fact, it has failed every time, and yet they still try again, as I guess they think maybe next time they'll get it right. And of course, as we know, next time seems to be a lot closer in our lifetime than some of us would like to admit. Something else I would not like to admit is we have reached the bottom of the hour, folks. So as you guys know, we've got to go ahead and take a network break right here. Unfortunately, I know. But ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show and the 45 ways listed to turn America into a communist country coming up in the second half. My name's Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. You're listening to the Dark Wolf's Den radio show exclusively on Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, the RiponRabbitHole.com, home of the Freedom Flame. Stick around, we will be right back with the second half after this short message. Don't touch that dial. That's right.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Oh yeah, Jerry Hicks on a Thursday night. Hi everyone, it's AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Are you enjoying welcoming back Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den radio show? His look as an intro to the Communist Manifesto? I know I am. If you are and you haven't done so already, please make sure to sign up for your Backstage VIP pass at RiponRabbitHole.com. It's absolutely free to do so. It always will be, but it's going to unlock a bunch of really cool features for you. We do not sell, give away, or share your personal information. We will not shadow ban you. We won't deplatform you, because Ripon Common Sense is built on the Freedom Flame. And we are united regardless of your geographic location or political stance in today's day and age. We are united on our freedoms. So I look forward to seeing all of you there, where the conversation continues after the show. RiponRabbitHole.com. I'll return again tomorrow night with episode 8 of the Freedom Flame Friday series. Come along with us as we dive deep down the rabbit hole in a guest panel discussion on tolerance. Oh my goodness, if you have not heard a Freedom Flame Friday, you will want to be here tomorrow night, Friday, July 22nd, as yet another fantastic panel has been gathered for your listening pleasure. Starts at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as all shows do. Then Saturday night, July 23rd, come along with me as we dive down the rabbit hole and explore the topic of gimmicks, subtle tools and tricks that convince us one way or the other. We're going to explore that rabbit hole in depth Saturday night, July 23rd. Then we'll end out the weekend right together with you. A look at MUFON, Sunday, July 24th. A dive deep down the rabbit hole as we closely look at the organization of MUFON. Now, if you're unaware, MUFON is an international organization that investigates UFO myself, but nevertheless, people submit reports from around the globe, not just the United States. Reports come in daily sometimes from Canada, Japan, Germany, Brazil, even from Australia and many other countries. So come along with us as we end out the weekend right together with you. Sunday night, a look at MUFON. It's going to be actually a good weekend ahead. We will return back to tonight's topic, Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Introduction to the Communist Manifesto. You're listening to the Ripon Common Sense Radio Network, home of the Freedom Flame, RiponRabbitHole.com.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right. I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf. And welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den radio show Freedom Flame series, Introduction to the Communist Manifesto. In the first half, we went over the 10 planks of communism, as well as a basic overview of the Communist Manifesto. If you haven't heard the first half, if you missed that, make sure you go back and check that out. For sure, you missed a lot of good information. Also, remember to cut the feed here in just a little while over on YouTube, and will be exclusively on the radio player and the chat rooms available on the RiponRabbitHole.com. That is RiponRabbitHole.com. Once again, click on the left-hand corner. As soon as you get on the page, it'll be the thumbnail for the Dark Wolf's Den Show. You click on that, it will take you to a page with a chat room about halfway down the page. We are monitoring that chat room also. We would love to see you guys over there continuing the conversation after we shut off the YouTube feed. However, we are going to continue our discussion on communism as the Communist Manifesto, I should say, as we are now going to take a look at the 45 goals of the Communist Party, how to turn America into a communist society. The 45 Goals of Communism were first published on March of 1961. In the book, The Naked Communist, these goals were read into the Congressional Record by Albert S. Herlong on January 10th, 1963. They are the stated means by which Communist Russia could overthrow the United States. Now, we know Communist Russia does not any longer exist. However, we know the communist idea and the Communist Party in some form or another is still very much active, right? Goal number 1. The U.S. should accept coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Goal number 2. The U.S. should be willing to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. Number 3, develop the illusion that the total disarmament by the U.S. would be a demonstration of, quote, moral strength, end quote. And I would argue even disarmament of its population, too. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not the items could be used for war. Number 5, extend long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites, or I would say any communist organization. Number 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. Number 7, grant recognition of Red China and admission of Red China to the United Nations. Number 8, set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the Germany question by free election under supervision of the United Nations. Number 9, prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the U.S. has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. How interesting is that? Number 10, allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN, or all communist countries, I would again argue. Number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, now this is where it gets really scary, folks. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Something that we're getting really close, scary enough to seeing in this day and age. Am I right or am I wrong? Number 12, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Of course, they want to save themselves. Number 13, do away with loyalty oaths. And what does that mean? Like the Pledge of Allegiance, right? That's a loyalty oath to the country. You do away with that. Number 14, continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. Again, I would argue instead of Russia there, it's saying any communist country. Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. I don't know, guys. What do you think? Do you think perhaps at least one of the political parties in the United States may be captured by a communist regime? I don't know. It's up to you. Number 16, use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming that their activities violate civil rights. Now, again, does this not sound like something very familiar in this day and age? Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts, socialism, and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Folks, once again, it's kind of scary when you listen to some of these, how close to reality that they really, really are, how close to home that they hit. I think of things like theories that are recently been argued about being taught in school, for instance, different ways to change the curriculum and teach our kids things that we are not happy with our kids being taught, as well as number 18, gain control of all student newspapers. Make sure you control the media. That way you control the mind. Number 19, use student riots to foment public protest against programs or organizations that are under communist attack. So using these student riots as basically militia arms of the Communist Party. It's almost like other political parties, the Nazis, for instance, using the brown shirts. It seems recently in the last couple of years we had something similar to that situation here in America. I may be misremembering, I'm not sure. Use students' riots, number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writings, and policy making positions. Infiltrate the press. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I feel our mass media press anymore has very well been infiltrated by a bunch of propagandists who aren't even good at the propaganda that they're trying to spin. That's why us free speaking minds have really become the news anymore, and the mainstream mass media has really lost a lot of its control because it has been infiltrated, at least in this wolf's opinion. Number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion picture. Again, the ability to use propaganda on the citizenry of the country to sway them to more of a socialist, more of a communist viewpoint, to make it seem okay over time through the propaganda for communism to set in. So controlling the media to the degree of radio, TV, and motion picture would definitely be a very important activity. Number 22, I can't even count. 22, continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to, quote, eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, end quote, substituting shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. It seems recently, again, in my memory, that in this country here, it seems they were wanting to tear down statues of our history, wanting to tear down things that have been put up in these parks that truly symbolize America and what America was formed out of and for. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm misremembering once again, but it seems recently that had become an issue. Right, guys? Number 23, control art critics and directors of art museums. Quote, our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. And that's what they want to do. They want to change the way people literally look at the world. Change the art style, change and destroy the culture. Number 24, eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Again, it seems very recently that this call for certain obscenity in society to be accepted culturally, and it's really been failing. And last but not least, for the YouTube crowd, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Once again, a push to change our culture. And I'm going to stop there on YouTube, guys. And here in a second, the feed is going to cut, and we are going to be only over on the RiponRabbitHole.com. It's the only place you'll be able to hear the feed as well as interact with the chat along and know what's actually being said, right? If you want to join us over there, we would love to have you guys. If you haven't already, it is our on the radio